Before you watch this shocking true story, hit that like button and subscribe to witness one of the most controversial decisions a man ever made that divided an entire town. This is a story about principle, defiance, and what happens when one person stands alone against everyone else. This will make you question what you believe is right. Don't miss it. The entire town of Yellowstone Valley, Montana, was gathered outside the old Henderson Ranch on a Tuesday afternoon in September. There were hundreds of people. The sheriff was there. The mayor was there. Local business owners were there. Families were there with their children. Everyone was begging the same man to stop. Everyone was asking him not to do it. "Please, Mr. Henderson," the mayor said, standing at the fence. "We're asking you as a community. Don't do this. We're begging you." The townspeople were chanting, "Don't. Please don't. Please don't." But 72-year-old Robert Henderson stood in the middle of his ranch, completely unmoved. He had made his decision. He had decided to do something that the entire town was against. Something that would change the town forever. Something that would make him the most hated man in Yellowstone Valley. And he was going to do it anyway. The crowd started to become angry. People were yelling. Some were crying. Someone threw a rock that landed near Robert's feet. Robert looked at the crowd with sadness but also with determination. He knew what he was about to do would destroy his reputation. He knew it would change his relationships with people he'd known his entire life. He knew it would cost him something precious. But he believed it was the right thing to do. So he did it anyway. And the town would never be the same. Why this works ***, you're hooked by the mystery and the conflict. What could be so important that a man would defy his entire town? What could be so controversial that hundreds of people would come to stop him? Yellowstone Valley, Montana. Yellowstone Valley was a small town of about 3,500 people in southwestern Montana. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Where neighbors helped neighbors. Where community was the most important thing. Where people cared deeply about their town and what it stood for. The town had been founded in the 1880s as a cattle ranching community. For over 100 years, ranching had been the lifeblood of Yellowstone Valley. Ranching had built the town. Ranching had sustained the town. The Henderson Ranch was one of the oldest ranches in the area. It had been in Robert Henderson's family for 4 generations. It was a symbol of the town's heritage. It was a place where people had spent their entire lives working the land. Robert Henderson had lived his entire life on the ranch. He'd been born there. He'd grown up there. He'd raised his children there. He'd raised his grandchildren there. The ranch was his identity. It was his life. The changing times. But in recent years, Yellowstone Valley had been facing serious challenges. Young people were moving away. They didn't want to be ranchers. They wanted to move to cities. They wanted better paying jobs. They wanted different lives. The population of the town had been declining. Businesses were closing. Schools were consolidating. The town was dying. Robert Henderson had watched this happen with sadness. He'd watched his community slowly disappear. He'd watched the younger generation leave and never come back. The idea. One day, Robert Henderson had an idea that changed everything. If the town was going to survive, it needed tourism. It needed new sources of income. It needed to attract visitors who would spend money at the local restaurants, the local hotels, the local shops. What if the Henderson Ranch became something more than just a cattle ranch? What if it became a destination? What if it became a place where people from all over the country came to experience authentic ranch life? Robert proposed the idea to the town council. He proposed turning the Henderson Ranch into a guest ranch. A place where tourists could come, stay in comfortable cabins, work on the ranch, eat ranch food, and experience life as a real rancher. Robert believed this could save the town. He believed it could bring tourism dollars into the community. He believed it could create jobs for local people. He believed it could keep Yellowstone Valley alive. The town's response. The town's response was mixed at first. Some people loved the idea. They saw it as a way to save their community. They saw it as a way to bring money and jobs to the town. But many people hated the idea. They said Robert was betraying the ranching tradition. They said he was turning their sacred heritage into a theme park. They said he was destroying the soul of the community by commercializing it. The local ranchers were especially opposed. They saw Robert's guest ranch as a betrayal of everything ranching meant. Ranching was hard work. It was a way of life. It wasn't something you turned into entertainment for tourists. It's an insult to our heritage, said Tom Barkley, who owned the ranch next to Robert's. You're turning sacred land into a circus. Other longtime residents agreed. They didn't want tourists running all over Yellowstone Valley. They didn't want outsiders changing their town. They liked their community the way it was. They liked it being small and private and theirs. The public campaign against Robert. As Robert's plan became more public, opposition grew. People held meetings. They organized campaigns. They collected petitions. They published articles in the local newspaper opposing the guest ranch. Some of the arguments were practical. Some were emotional. Some were just plain angry. It will bring traffic to our quiet roads, people said. It will bring noise and chaos. It will destroy the peace we've worked our entire lives to preserve. It's un-American, others said. Ranching is about living off the land. It's about being honest. This is just about making money off tourists. You're betraying us, people said to Robert directly. You're betraying the ranching legacy. You're betraying everything your ancestors built. Robert listened to all of this. He understood the opposition. But he didn't change his mind. Robert's conviction. What people didn't understand was that Robert had thought about this very carefully. Robert loved ranching. He loved the heritage. He loved the way of life. But he also loved his town. He loved the people. He loved the community. And he could see that if nothing changed, the community would die. The young people would leave. The businesses would close. The schools would shut down. Yellowstone Valley would become a ghost town. Robert believed that saving the community was more important than preserving the past exactly as it had always been. He believed that evolution and change were necessary for survival. I'm not betraying our heritage, Robert said in a town meeting. I'm saving it. If this town dies, there will be no heritage left to preserve. I'm doing this to save Yellowstone Valley. But most people didn't listen. Most people only heard betrayal. The final preparations. Robert moved forward with his plans despite the opposition. He began constructing cabins on the ranch. He built a main lodge. He created facilities for guests. He started advertising the Henderson Guest Ranch to tourism companies and travel websites. Every step of the way, people protested. Every step of the way, he received letters, phone calls, and visits from angry townspeople. Please, Robert, his friend of 50 years, Martha, said when she saw him at the grocery store. Please don't do this. You're going to ruin everything. Robert hugged her. I'm trying to save everything, he said. But I understand why you can't see that yet. His own children were divided on the issue. His daughter supported him. His son did not. The family had become fractured over the guest ranch. Robert's son, James, who had inherited the ranching tradition from his father, was particularly hurt. You're destroying what Dad built, James said bitterly. You're destroying what I'm trying to build. How could you do this? I'm not destroying it, Robert said. I'm transforming it. There's a difference. But James couldn't see the difference. And their relationship became strained. The opposition becomes more intense. As the opening date of the Henderson Guest Ranch approached, the opposition became more intense. People started showing up at Robert's house. Not in a threatening way, exactly, but it was clearly intimidating. They would stand outside his property and hold signs. They would write letters to the editor. They would organize boycotts of any business that supported Robert. Don't do this, they pleaded. Please don't open this ranch. Please don't bring this to our community. Robert's wife, Sarah, who had supported him through everything, was torn. She understood the principle behind what Robert was doing, but she also understood the pain it was causing. She understood the division it was creating in their community. Are you sure about this? She asked him one night. No, Robert admitted. I'm not sure about much anymore, but I'm sure it's the right thing to do. The opening day. The day the Henderson Guest Ranch officially opened, the entire town was watching. Robert had invited the media. He wanted coverage. He wanted people to know what he was doing and why. But the town saw it differently. They saw it as Robert showing off. As Robert celebrating his betrayal. Hundreds of people gathered at the entrance to the ranch. They were protesting. They were angry. They were pleading with Robert one last time. The mayor stood at the gate with a petition. It had been signed by over 2,000 people, more than half the population of the county. "Robert, we're asking you one final time," the mayor said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Please don't do this. This petition represents our community. This represents what people want." Robert looked at the petition. He looked at the faces of people he'd known his entire life. He saw anger. He saw sadness. He saw disappointment. "I'm sorry," Robert said quietly. "I know this hurts. I know this feels like a betrayal. But I believe this is right." And then he did it anyway. He opened the gates to the Henderson Guest Ranch. He welcomed the first group of guests from California and Texas and New York and around the world. The fury. The town's reaction was immediate and fierce. The local newspaper ran a headline, "Henderson Betrays Heritage, Guest Ranch Opens Despite Town Opposition." People who had been Robert's friends for decades stopped talking to him. The local diner, where Robert had eaten breakfast almost every day for 50 years, asked him to stop coming. His son James refused to speak to him for months. Business owners who had supported the guest ranch by supplying food and services found themselves being boycotted. People said, "If you help Henderson, we won't shop at your store anymore." Robert became a pariah in his own community. The man who had lived his entire life in Yellowstone Valley was now treated like an outsider. Some people spray-painted his fences. Some left anonymous notes telling him to leave town. Some simply crossed the street when they saw him coming. Robert's wife Sarah tried to protect him from the worst of it. But Robert heard about it. Robert knew what people were saying. Robert understood the depth of the community's anger. The difficult truth. What made it even harder was that Robert didn't know if he was right. He believed he was doing the right thing. But maybe the town was right. Maybe there was value in preserving things exactly as they had always been. Maybe progress wasn't always good. Robert had conversations with himself in the middle of the night. Conversations where he questioned everything. Conversations where he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Sarah would find him sitting on the porch at 3 a.m., staring at nothing. "Do you think I did the right thing?" Robert asked. "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I think you did what you believed was right. That's different from knowing if it was actually right." Robert nodded. He understood. He had acted on conviction, but conviction doesn't always equal correctness. The first season. The Henderson Guest Ranch's first season was a modest success. Tourists came. They stayed in the cabins. They worked on the ranch. They ate authentic ranch food. They went horseback riding and learned about ranching. Many of them loved the experience. Word spread. Travel magazines wrote about the ranch. Social media posts made it famous. By the second season, the ranch was getting reservations months in advance. The economic impact. Something else started to happen that Robert had hoped for but wasn't sure would occur. The local restaurants started getting busier. Tourists would eat breakfast at the Henderson Guest Ranch, but then they'd eat lunch and dinner in town. Local restaurants that had been struggling suddenly had customers again. The local hotels started filling up. Tourists needed places to stay before they got to the ranch or after they left. The economy of Yellowstone Valley started improving. Local people started getting jobs. Cooks, ranch hands, cleaning staff, maintenance workers. The guest ranch needed to hire local people to operate. The community slowly changes. Slowly, gradually, the community's anger began to soften. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't like everyone suddenly decided Robert was right. But it was gradual. People started seeing the positive effects. A year after the guest ranch opened, Martha, Robert's longtime friend who had begged him not to open the ranch, came to the ranch with her husband. They wanted to see what Robert had done. After their visit, Martha visited Robert. "I still think you did something wrong," Martha said. "I still think you betrayed our heritage. But I also see what you were trying to do. I see that you might have been right about saving our town." It was the first acknowledgement from anyone in the community that Robert might not have been completely wrong. The shift. Over the next few years, more and more people came around. The local business owners whose businesses were saved by the tourism money began to publicly thank Robert. Local workers who had jobs at the ranch or whose jobs were created because of the ranch's economic impact began to understand. Even some of the hardest-line opponents began to soften. Not all of them. Some people never forgave Robert for what he did. But many people did. The local ranchers were the slowest to come around. They still saw what Robert did as a betrayal of the ranching way of life. But even some of them had to admit that without Robert's action, the town might have died. The impact on James. What took the longest was Robert's relationship with his son, James. James had been so angry. He had felt so betrayed. He had believed that his father was destroying the ranching tradition that James was trying to preserve. But years later, when James watched tourists experience ranching for the first time, when he saw young people getting interested in ranching because they'd stayed at the guest ranch, James began to see something different. The Henderson guest ranch wasn't destroying the ranching tradition. It was preserving it. It was showing people what ranching really meant. It was inspiring a new generation to appreciate ranching. One day, James came to his father and they talked for the first time in years about what had happened. "I was wrong," James said finally. "I thought you were destroying our heritage. But you were actually saving it. You were saving it by adapting it, by making it relevant to the modern world." Robert hugged his son. He cried. And his son cried too. "I didn't know if I was right," Robert admitted. "I've spent years wondering if I'd made a mistake. Hearing you say this, it means everything." The vindication. By the time Robert was 80 years old, the Henderson Guest Ranch was one of the most successful tourism businesses in Montana. It employed over 100 people. It brought millions of dollars into Yellowstone Valley. It had saved the town from economic decline. The local schools had more students because families had moved to the area for jobs created by the guest ranch. New businesses had opened in town. The population had started to grow instead of declining. And the ranching tradition wasn't destroyed. It was stronger than ever. More people understood what ranching meant. More people respected it. More young people were interested in it. Robert had been right. And finally, after years of anger and opposition, the town understood it. The courage to stand alone. The deepest lesson from this story is about the courage to stand alone. Robert Henderson did something that his entire community opposed. Everyone was against him. His neighbors were against him. His church was against him. His own family was divided over it. But he believed he was right, so he did it anyway. That takes incredible courage. It's easy to go along with what everyone wants. It's easy to be liked by your community. It's hard to stand alone. It's hard to face the anger and disappointment of people you care about. But sometimes standing alone is the only courageous choice. Sometimes doing what you believe is right means being opposed by everyone around you. Robert understood this. And he had the strength to do it anyway. The difficulty of vision. Another lesson from this story is about the difficulty of having vision that others can't see. Robert could see that the town was dying. He could see that unless something changed, Yellowstone Valley would become a ghost town. He could see that tourism could save the community. But other people couldn't see this. They only saw tradition being destroyed. They only saw their way of life being threatened. Having vision that others don't share is painful. It means you have to do things alone. It means you have to face criticism and anger from people who don't understand. But sometimes vision is what communities need. Sometimes one person's ability to see what needs to change is what saves everyone. The question of progress. This story raises a profound question. Is progress always good? The town didn't want progress. They wanted things to stay the same. They wanted to preserve their heritage and their way of life. But progress was necessary for survival. Sometimes you have to change to survive. Sometimes the old ways can't sustain you anymore. This isn't a simple question. There is real value in preservation. There is real value in not changing things just for the sake of change. But there's also real value in being willing to adapt and evolve. Robert understood this complexity. He didn't want to destroy the ranching heritage. He wanted to transform it in a way that would save it. The long view. What's important about Robert's story is that it wasn't vindicated immediately. Robert had to live with the anger. He had to live with the doubt. He had to live with the pain of being rejected by his community. For years, he had no way of knowing if he'd been right. It only became clear over time. Over years. As the town gradually saw the positive results of what Robert had done. This teaches us something important about doing what we believe is right. Sometimes we don't get immediate validation. Sometimes we have to believe in something for a long time before we see if it was worth it. That requires faith. That requires conviction. That requires the kind of inner strength that Robert had. The importance of understanding. As the story progressed and the town began to understand what Robert had done, something beautiful happened. People didn't just accept what Robert had done. They began to understand it. They began to see his perspective. They began to recognize that Robert had been acting out of love for his community, not out of betrayal. Understanding is different from agreeing. People in the town still had legitimate concerns about preserving heritage. But they could understand that Robert's motives were good. They could understand that he was trying to save something important, even if the method was controversial. This is an important lesson about how we treat people we disagree with. We should try to understand their perspective. We should try to see what they're trying to accomplish, even if we disagree with their method. The cost of conviction. This story also teaches us that conviction has a cost. Robert lost friendships. He damaged his relationship with his son. He became a pariah in his own community. He lived with doubt and criticism for years. Standing by your convictions isn't free. It costs something. Sometimes it costs you a lot. But Robert believed it was worth the cost. And in the end, the community came to agree. The universal truth. What this story ultimately teaches us is that vision, courage, and conviction matter. The world doesn't change because most people think it should change. The world changes because one person, or a small group of people, sees something others don't see and has the courage to do something about it. Robert Henderson saw that his community needed to change. He had the courage to pursue that vision despite massive opposition. And because of that courage, his entire community was saved. We all face moments like this. Moments where we believe something is right but everyone around us believes it's wrong. Moments where we have to choose between being popular and being true to our convictions. Robert's story teaches us that those moments matter. That doing what we believe is right, even when it costs us, is what creates real change in the world. Final call to action. This story divided you for a reason. Because it challenges us to think about difficult choices. Because it asks us whether we'd have the courage to stand alone. Because it reminds us that change is sometimes necessary, even when it hurts. If this video made you think about what you believe is right, about the courage it takes to stand alone, and about how vision and conviction can change the world, like this video right now and subscribe to discover more stories about people who had the courage to do what they believed was right, even when everyone else was against them. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that challenges you to think deeper. That questions what you believe. That shows you the complexity of real life and real decisions. Leave a comment below **. Do you think Robert Henderson was right? Would you have done what he did? Have you ever had to stand alone for something you believed in? Have you ever been opposed by your entire community but stuck to your convictions? Share your story. Your experience might help someone else understand the difficulty and the courage required to do what's right. Or tell us, what did you think when you first heard about Robert's plan? Did your opinion change as the story went on? Are there situations in your own community where you think change is necessary but people are resisting it? What's your perspective? Because this story is really about the difficulty of progress. Progress isn't always good. Sometimes tradition and preservation are what we need. But sometimes progress is necessary for survival. The truth is complex. The truth is that both Robert's community and Robert himself had legitimate points. The community was right to want to preserve their heritage. Robert was right that the community needed to change to survive. Both things were true at the same time. This teaches us to be humble about our convictions. To understand that people who disagree with us might also have valid points. To recognize that change is complex and difficult and often hurts people, even when it's necessary. But it also teaches us that sometimes someone has to be willing to stand alone. Someone has to be willing to face opposition. Someone has to be willing to believe in something despite everyone being against them. And sometimes that person is right. Sometimes that person's vision is what saves everyone. We need more people with that kind of courage. We need more people willing to think deeply about what their communities need. We need more people willing to make hard choices, even when those choices are unpopular. Robert Henderson was such a person. And because he had that courage, his entire town was saved. What will you do when you face a choice like that? Will you follow the crowd? Or will you have the courage to stand alone for what you believe is right? Thank you for watching this complex and challenging story. I'll see you in the next video where we continue exploring the stories of people who made difficult choices and stood by their convictions. Now go like and subscribe. And then go think about what you believe is right. And ask yourself if you'd have the courage to do it even if everyone was against you. ****.